cliche as it sounds, I would want to pick up a bottle, I would pick up a pen, and no matter how bad that urge, anybody that's ever had alcoholism at that level, I feel for you. That's a hard bug to get rid of. I pick up that pen and pencil, man, and I start writing, and sometimes it didn't even make sense. You'd write something on a napkin, that I thought sounded cool writing, or something like that, and I'd wake up in the morning with this emotional cobwebs of words, throw them on paper, and try to make sense of all of this and 2 decades of war and everything that comes with that.
Welcome to Wildlife Outdoors with your host, Russell and Jose. If you have a passion for conservation of the outdoors, or you're enjoying a calming hike in the mountains, an exhilarating kayak trip on the river, feeling a fish on the end of your line, cooking on an open flame in a primitive campsite, or stalking big game, just waiting for the perfect shot, you're in the right place. So put on your boots and polarized sunglasses and come along for the ride.
Welcome back to another episode of Wildlife Outdoors. I'm Russell, and today's guest brings a powerful story rooted in service and resilience. Anthony Dyer is a former combat special missions aviator who served in some of the most demanding environments imaginable. This episode is not just about combat aviation, though. It's about what happens after the uniform comes off. Anthony is the author of Moonchild, a deeply personal story about trauma, recovery, family, and rediscovering purpose after years of service. So, Anthony, welcome to Wildlife Outdoors. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm good, doing good. Yourself, Russell? It's an honor to be here, man.
Hey, man, I'm happy to spend this time with you. I, admittedly haven't read your book, although just reading about it, I think it is definitely going to be a good read, so I will be picking it up soon to read it. But before we dig into the book, man, I'd like to learn a little bit about you. If you could just kind of tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, no problem. I grew up, I was born in April 7th, 1982 in a small town called Silva, North Carolina. I often joke with people when I could throw a baseball across my whole town was the size of it growing up. It's grown a little bit since then, but we call it in the deep heart of Appalachia. Yeah, that sense of community was strong. It's one of those communities where everybody had everybody's back. Everybody knew each other's business, whether that's good or bad, sometimes depends. But yeah, it was a really awesome community to grow up, and there's, if I always joke and tell people, if you want to moonshine, you just go to your neighbor's house, that type of atmosphere. And what I love most about it was, like fishing, for example. Me and my dad were big trout fishermen, and if I wanted to go fishing, I would literally walk half a mile down the road and spend hours upon hours in the dog days of summer out there. So it was a beautiful place. It's cooler weather, up in the mountains, and you get all 4 seasons. You got the coniferous trees up there, and the rivers are Nantahala and the Tuckasegee and stuff like that. So you have the eastern band of Cherokee Nation about 20 minutes away, and like half my high school was native. So a lot of awesome stuff I learned from those resilient people, and just fascinated with that growing up.
Dude, that's awesome. I haven't been deep into Appalachia before, but I've been through, because I've driven from Maine down to Arkansas where I'm at now. And just a gorgeous part of the country. And I made it a point where I definitely need to go up there. And me personally, being a fly fisherman, I want to go in blue line, find some of those smaller streams and catch some native brook trout and just experience it in its fullness. And, but it is absolutely gorgeous. And I just love the mountains in general. And like, oddly enough, so where I'm at in Arkansas, I'm kind of like central Arkansas, but you head up to northwest Arkansas, and a lot of the people that are like, I wouldn't say native, but have been there for, 7+ generations, majority of them came from Appalachia. So there's a lot of similar ties and similar roots from that area to where you're from. So from what I've learned, it just seems like a tight-knit culture, which, like you said, could be a good or a bad thing. Everybody seems to be in your business, and everybody.
Yeah. And it's I was watching the other day, and there's this guy, and I think he's like a former, or he still is a cop or something up in Appalachia. And he talks about some of the Appalachianisms, like haunted stuff, and there's a lot of, of course, there's the Appalachian Trail, and there's stories behind that. But I found, I live in New Mexico now, and there is some commonalities. Like, my wife's actually, she's from New Mexico, and like she's Navajo as well. And there's things that translate sort of like you don't whistle at night in the woods, because something might answer back, and just stuff like that is, I've always been interested in, and I miss going back home. I should go back home more often, to be honest with you. But when I do, I cherish it, man.
And that's awesome. What part of New Mexico are you in?
So I live in Clovis, New Mexico. It's basically eastern New Mexico. If you were to drive an hour and a half west on 6084 from Lubbock, Texas, you would hit, Cannon Air Force Base area in Clovis, New Mexico.
Nice. I actually have a buddy that owns a daycare center in Clovis, New Mexico.
Awesome, man. Yeah.
They live here in Arkansas, but they lived in Clovis for a good while, opened up a daycare center, and now they have people over there still running it, and they live here in Arkansas. So
another thing that's crazy, like Arkansas, that's where we send the instructor pilots, the C-130, essentially, to Arkansas, Little Rock there, yeah. So a lot of guys spend a lot of hours and days there.
Yeah, I see them flying quite often. I was working in a town called Searcy, and I
Yeah.
live about 2 hours south of that. And whenever I would drive through, I'd go through. It's in Jacksonville, and you'll just see them flying, and they'll do their little
Oh yeah.
trips and whatnot.
Yeah. Those four fans of freedom is what we call them.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, but we went to me and my co-host was, hey, we went to where were we at? Angel Fire, New Mexico.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think on the way back, because he lives in Texas, we drove back through Clovis and Lubbock, and then came back down that way. And dude, it's gorgeous up there. We spent some time at Eagle Nest State Park.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's definitely beautiful parts. Where I'm at, it's the high plains, and it's you can always tell when it's tumbleweed season, man. If you have a truck with a cattle garner, man, you got all them things all over the place.
Well, so you grew up in North Carolina, and then at what point did you join the military? Did you live anywhere prior to joining the military?
Yeah, so my senior year, I was 17, about 6 months or so from turning 18. And my dad gives me the typical dad talk, and you're about to be a grown man. It's time to get a job, go to college, get out, and didn't really have the grades or desire, I'll say, for college at that time. And so I talked to a Navy recruiter first, and he was talking about being on a boat for 6 months. I was like, I don't know if I like that. And talked to an Army recruiter, and I was like, I don't know that if that's for me either. And then I talked to my dad. He was in the Air Force down in Tampa for 4 years, way before I was born, and then he moved back to the mountains. But about sort of the quality of life of Air Force, and the good chow halls, right, and the, TDY and golf clubs and all that jazz that we often get joked about. But yeah, it was essentially the best decision I ever made. There was a lot, like I didn't do it. There was words like, our core values like service before self. And, I didn't know what those words meant yet. Like 9/11 hadn't even really happened yet. And so I was doing it, to be honest with you, for a paycheck, a stable paycheck in healthcare and et cetera. And yeah, so I definitely found out later what those words meant. And, I'm sure we'll get into some of that later, but yeah.
That's awesome. So did you spend much time? I know you said that you and your dad fished when you were growing up. Did you spend much time outdoors when you were in the Air Force? Because I have a buddy who, oddly enough, was in the Navy, and he got stuck on a submarine. But he was the type where whenever they would go to port, like he would go travel, he'd be in a different country, and he would go experience the outdoors there. So is that something that you got the opportunity to do?
So there was definitely there's programs like this. It's called outdoor recreation on like Cannon Air Force Base, for example. Like what was cool with that, I don't know if they do this anymore, but it was awesome when they did. So every deployment, like we'd go to Bagram, right, for 90 days, then 90 days back, and on those 90 days, you had certain points that were worth money with that place, and you could get like for example, me and my buddy, we got an A-frame camper, and we went to some lake in Texas there, and just camping here and there, and nothing too like I've been fishing a few times, but not like when me and Dad would go way up in the streams and the rivers and stuff like that.
That's awesome. And that's one thing that I regret, not joining the military when I was younger. Because I mean, honestly, I was just scared. I was like, I don't want to get shot at. Like, I didn't know much about the military. I was like, I don't want to get shot at. So I didn't join, and I didn't really have anybody lead me that direction. And looking back, it's like, man, I could have traveled the world because I love traveling now. And it's like, man, I could have done that on somebody else's dime and got to experience all these things and learn all these things. And like you mentioned, paycheck and benefits, that's something that comes along with it too. So I mean, me personally, I regret not joining the armed forces in any branch but that's something that I regret. But I know if I were to be in, like, I would travel as much as I could. I mean, obviously, there to do a job, but if I had an opportunity to go somewhere, I definitely would. And I just love being outdoors. I mean, for me, it's a healing thing. And I've heard of a lot of people, that whether they're in the military or not, it's been very therapeutic for them. And we can talk more about that once we hear a little bit more about your story and your book. So what led you to write this book?
Yeah, so I had I didn't start out as an aviator. A lot of people know, but like roughly 2% of the enlisted force of the Air Force flies. And my job as a special missions aviator, it was basically, if you're familiar with the AC-130 gunship, it's often referred to as like Puff the Magic Dragon or God's right hand every now and then. Yeah, so I had about 10 years into it, I'm actually back home in Appalachia, and I'm on leave and with some friends at a pizza place, and I look out, man, and I see the same cracks in the road, man. I was sitting there thinking, like, man, like those cracks have been there like since I can remember. I was just sitting there thinking about some of the talks with my grandfather about making a difference and leaving your footprint on the world, right? And I was like, man, I don't want to leave cracks. I don't want to leave craters. I want to quit sitting on the sideline. And I had basically made the decision to join the 16th Special Operations Squadron as what was then aerial gunner. And the whole mission set behind that is to provide that timely and precise close air support for those unconventional forces. I always often refer to them as those super ninjas. And that's your SEALs, your Green Berets, your Rangers, etc. And yeah, and that was my whole why all those years, man. And was to making sure those men and women got home to their family, and to sort of paint a picture. There was letters around that squadron, right? For example, one of my favorite ones was there was a ranger and he's holding his baby girl and he thanks the gunship squadron, for the rounds and close air support. He was able to go home and see his baby girl, and to me, that was my reason for being for all those years. And when I did my last deployment, I saw the writing on the wall and, that loss of identity. A lot of veterans struggle with that, to be honest with you. And, I'm out processing this, this Air Force base, right, to get my Covenant DD-214 blanket, right? And, you're filling all that paperwork and it's my last day in uniform and they walk out and you realize there's no door handle on the other end of that door often in these type of situations. So you can walk out, but you can never really get back in. And yeah, so that loss of identity and sense of purpose. And I struggle with that bad. And, which led to be honest with you, a severe drinking problem, man. What was a weekend drinking habit turned into a pint a night, with sleeping medication, you name it, to go to sleep. And so finally my wife gave me the ultimatum, to, either get help or choose her or my daughter. And by the grace of God, I chose my family, and so part of that process of healing was seeing a USOCOM psychiatrist, and I did prolonged exposure therapy because I didn't want medication at the time. And what that is basically, you write your story out over and over and over and over till you get comfortable being uncomfortable talking about it. And I couldn't even tell this story like back then, but the first time I told the psychiatrist story, I cried, she cried. And, she always said, you should tell your story, it would help others, over and over. And when I got out and the dust settled, man, I was like, finally, like, I'm going to pull the trigger on this thing. Cause like, if one person gets help from this, and that's a win, that's a benefit.
Yeah. That's awesome. So it started off as you just writing, like you said, for exposure therapy. At what point did that turn into you wanting to write a book about it?
Yeah, what would happen? And to be honest with you, man, every time, as cliche as this sounds, I would want to pick up a bottle, I would pick up a pen. And, no matter how bad that urge, anybody that's ever had alcoholism to that level, I feel for you. That's a hard bug to get rid of. But, I pick up that pen and pencil, man, and I start writing. And sometimes it didn't even make sense, Eminem style. Like I'd write something on a napkin, that I thought sounded cool, right? Or something like that. And I'd wake up in the morning with this emotional cobwebs of words, throw them on paper and try to make sense of all of this and 2 decades of war and everything that comes with that.
That's awesome. So did it help you more to write, to be exposed to it like you were in therapy, or did it help more to actually write the book?
Yeah, I'll put it this way. Like I wouldn't be able to do this podcast like before therapy. You know what I mean? Like just talking with that lady and writing this stuff out is very therapeutic. And it's I think, and it helps people too that see, I've honestly sort of overwhelmed with the texts and messages from people I even flew with, right? That, hey, like, I'm glad you said that, this, because I struggle with that same loss of identity or whatever that demon is, and I think it shows too that your people, that your brothers and sisters you worked with and flew with, that you're here for them. That's the one thing the Air Force and especially special operations, I tell people, like, you're surrounded by 4 quarters, not 100 pennies, and when it comes to friendship, I often use that analogy. I'd rather have 4 quarters over 100 pennies, and the whole iron sharpens iron type of thing has always been big to me.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's very similar to something I went through. So I recently found my faith, and I didn't grow up being pulled towards any type of religion, and I found Christ. I think I got baptized the day before my 30th or 31st birthday, and so I'm still a baby Christian as it is. But it's one of those things to where I ended up going on different men's retreats, and those same terms are used, iron sharpens iron and things of that nature. And at one of the retreats I went to, it was the same thing. We had to end up writing out our story and presenting it in front of a group of men. And I didn't realize how therapeutic that could be, because I've never been a writer. Like, I'm the type of guy, I remember when I was in high school, I worked my ass off on this essay one time. And I was like, oh, I'm going to kill this essay. Like, cause I always got, not always, but majority of the time I got good grades in every subject except for English. And I worked my ass off on this essay, and I was like, this is going to be the one that I'm going to get a good grade on. And I got a 63 on it with a note that said, at least you tried. And I'm like, I'm not a writer, never have been, but writing out my story and like the things that I've been through in my life and my traumas, like, it was way more therapeutic than I thought it was going to be. Cause I thought I was just doing it to kind of go along with the motion of this retreat. And I mean, it releases things in a different way than just, talking about them in passing. I think it's just a man thing. Like, we try to, we'll talk about it and try to make it seem little, like it's not a big deal, no matter how bad it's actually hurting us on the inside. Like, we just kind of want to make it seem small and, it doesn't bother me type of thing. But when you're writing it down, like you're in your emotions, even if it's coming out like, just through the pen, you're not even really thinking about it, putting it out, it just still hits you in a different way. And it's crazy how that works.
Yeah, brother. And I'm so glad you brought up the faith aspect to this, man. Cause like, Russell, like, I tell people the most honest, like, and genuine, accountable conversation I ever had with myself was the day that I realized that, I turned to everything, the bottle, other people, and yes, psychiatry helped, man, but I turned to everything but Jesus, and I realize now that that's what I needed. Like I often tell people, one of my favorite new quotes is God will put you back together in front of those who broke you. And I like to say God will put you back together in front of what broke you, whatever vice or demon that is, like that Lion
Yeah,
of Judah, he's got it, man.
absolutely. And it's crazy how I've realized. So I've made friends with quite a few people that were in the armed forces, all different branches and all different levels too, whether they just, started off and did their few years and got out, or people that have been career. And there's a lot of similarities that I found from men that didn't serve, or men and women that didn't serve. And I've heard their stories through church and through faith. And then I've heard the stories through the military, and even, ones that aren't Christian, or don't practice any type of religion. There's very strong similarities between how they've found help, whether it was through Jesus or not. And in my case, it was Jesus that has ultimately saved my life, turned my life around from the way that I was heading. And everybody has their vice and everybody has their way. But in my opinion, like, there's nothing better than just understanding how wanted and loved you are, and that there's always somebody there to turn to. And it's hard because you don't see him, you don't hear him. And, of course, some people have the gift to where they can audibly hear him, but I'm not one of those people. And so it's hard to just kind of, explain that to somebody. But in my experience, just spending time in the Word and listening to, gospel music or contemporary Christian music or anything like that throughout my day, and kind of incorporating in every part of my life. There's things now that, trials are still going to come. And there's things that I've been through that I don't think I would have gotten through as easily as I have if it wasn't for my faith.
Oh yeah. In the book, even I put, Matthew 11:28, when I get to the point where I'm asking God, okay, well, why does, because there was a part of my career where I was in the rescue squadron, and the Payfawk helicopter was about 4 or 5 years. And, the whole motto behind that is these things we do that others may live. And I was on a really nasty casevac on the 8th June of 2018. And I talk about it there. And, we saw the best side of combat search and rescue, meaning we saved 5 guys, and then one American, when he got back on the operating table, passed away. And, and that sticks with you. And I would always ask God, why does bad things happen to great people, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that Matthew 11:28, it's Jesus talk. It says, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And I'd seen it on The Chosen too, and I could almost hear it in my head, like those words. That really hit me like a ton of bricks. And I still don't have the 100% answer to that question. I'm still looking for that, but I am at peace with everything that God's put me through, and I realize why He's put me through it now.
Yeah, absolutely. Dude, The Chosen is such a good show.
It's
too.
an awesome show. Awesome show.
It is. I found it before I even started going to church, and it was just, to me, it was entertaining, and it was new. It was like, oh, because like I didn't know the gospel, like I didn't know anything. Like I knew that people would claim Jesus was their Lord and Savior, but I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know the life that he lived or anything. Like I knew nothing. So to me, I was watching it for entertainment purposes. Like, dude, this storyline is awesome, And then
Yeah,
I
it's
actually started
incredible.
reading the Bible and learning about the gospel and having a relationship with Jesus. I was like, man, the show really puts it into perspective too. Like, I mean, I can't name how many times I've teared up just watching it, because
Yeah.
it actually puts a lot of things in perspective on throughout life as well. And just, I guess personifying Jesus more than just getting it from the
Oh
Word.
yeah. Yeah. I like it now. I like it. I can, show it to my daughter, and then she understands it, and stuff like that, and starting to
Yeah.
understand it more. But yeah, awesome show, man. And like I said, in the end, I owe Jesus everything. I'm not a great Christian. I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't an example of a good Christian, because I've lived a very carnal life, unfortunately. And but yeah, I'm starting to get, lean on God more and more and more, and get more into words.
Absolutely. And that's all you can do. I mean, we live in a secular world, and all of us fall short, but just knowing that you have something to go back to and follow the truth is really, I'm not going to sit here and name my sins, but that's one thing about Jesus is, he knows your sins and calls you by your name, and the enemy knows your name and calls you by your sins. So, I mean, do with that what you will, but I know which way I'm going to go.
100%, brother. That's a good way to put it.
Now I'd like to tell you about a couple of our sponsors. First, we have Bucked Up. When you're out in the wild, whether you're stalking a trophy buck, casting for that elusive bass, or trekking through rugged terrain, you need more than just grit. You need fuel that matches your passion for the outdoors. That's where Bucked Up energy drinks and supplements come in. Crafted for those who live life on the edge, Bucked Up offers a range of products designed to enhance your performance, endurance, and recovery. From the early morning hunts to the late night fishing trips, Bucked Up has your back. Use promo code WLO20 at checkout to receive 20% off your order. Explore their full range of products by clicking on the link in the description. Next, we have Foretold Coffee Company. Start your adventure with a brew as bold as the journey ahead. Foretold Coffee Company crafts ethically sourced small batch roast for those who find peace in the wild. Founded by Army veteran Joshua Sandoval, each cup reflects resilience, exploration, and the spirit of the outdoors. Whether it's the light Peruvian cocoa, the medium El Salvadoran bourbon, or the dark Mexican honey, each cup is perfect for the base camp mornings or fireside evenings. Subscribe to their monthly coffee club for 10% off and stay fueled for every expedition. To learn more, visit foretoldcoffeeco.com. So getting back kind of into the story, your story in the book and things along that line, is there any like type of particular story or particular event that was the hardest for you to revisit prior to going through therapy and writing the book that now seems a lot easier that you've been through that process?
Yeah, I would say definitely the Cassavac, and I talk about, the guy's death at the end of that story, and there was a moment to where we were at this fob, in East Africa, and like, I remember like, you would hear people in the camp talk about getting enough, OSB board and plywood to build a casket, and then the C-130 came down from up north and the ramp lowered, and American flag was on the casket, and his brothers, his fellow Green Berets walked him on the ramp there. And then I just remember thinking like, man, like that's someone's son, someone's friend, right? And to me, like I didn't know what service before self was or sacrifice was until that day. And those words are forever etched in my heart after that point. And, that is our nation's finest, and, I know Heraclitus talks about one in the 100, right? But yeah, those guys that spilled their blood on for us, so men and women, they're the one in the 100.
Absolutely. So what was your actual job? Were you the actual pilot or were you a gunner or what was your job?
Yeah, I was an aero gunner, and what the Air Force did in I think it's 2013, give or take. So they made a Swiss Army knife in the sky is what I call it. So on the H-130 gunship, for example, you had an aero gunner that now can do loadmaster duties as well as flight engineer duties. And then for the rescue helicopter, you had a flight engineer and aero gunner duties. So it's basically jack of all trades type thing. And you do on the gunship, you're considered the weapons expert, and you're trained to clear these malfunctions out in seconds. You do it over and over and over, and a lot of repetition. There were creatures of habit, and I know that sounds simple, but you could imagine some JTAC getting shot on the ground and you can't figure out what's wrong with your gun. Like you don't want to be that guy, right? And so I took a lot of pride in being the weapons expert of the crew and the weaponeering and getting that close air support out for those guys.
Man, well, I didn't start this off. I regret not saying it, but thank you for your service first and foremost. I should have said it earlier in the episode, but how long was your career?
Thank you, brother. Yeah, it was 21.4 years total.
Wow. And you said the first 10 years you were not doing aviation?
Yeah, I was not doing aviation. So my first 5 years in the Air Force, I was a weapons loader. And there was basically a 3-person crew that, in my case, for example, we loaded the F-15 Strike Eagles at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina. And that's the bombs and the air-to-air missiles as well. And then I did that for about 5 years. And then my second 5 years, even after 9/11 happened, I always thought about the firefighters, the 343 that ran in the towers on 9/11, right? And the cops as well. Like what's different and someone like that's DNA, right? Like why do they do that? And that's when I aspired to be a firefighter. And I was an Air Force firefighter at Charleston Air Force Base for approximately 5 years. It was an awesome part of my career. I enjoyed the firehouse and the men and women I got to serve with there and put the wet stuff on the hot stuff every now and then. But yeah, man, in 2010, that's when I had that realization, like, man, I want to get in the tip of the spear type stuff, and join special operations as an aviator.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, it sounds like you had a change of heart somewhere along the way, but it turned out good for you, and I'm glad to hear that.
Thanks, brother.
So you touched on a little bit earlier about feeling disconnected and, after leaving, just kind of having a loss of sense of self. So do you have any experience on why going through therapy and things along that nature to where what causes that? I mean, obviously, because that's your entire life and then you lose it essentially whenever you go back to being a civilian. But is there anything that you learned through psychiatry that's like why that triggers whenever you get out of the forces?
So it's basically the loss of sense of relevance, like, and there's really two sides to this where like one, I had to like get over myself and be like, this machine goes on, right. And the whole pride thing and all that. And the other side of that coin is to find those exciting moments in the calm. Like to me, like what is legacy now, right? Like right now, finding exciting moments and being the best father I could be, the best husband I could be. Like that's what matters, And I realized at a very young age, man, that like, especially when I retrained that like, there's no U-Haul behind a hearse. I like to say, the only thing you can really leave behind is how you're remembered, And So I think working on that goal, being remembered as being as a bro that was there for a bro or a woman, like a good friend, a good airman, a good teammate, good husband, a good father. To me, that's what legacy matters now.
Yeah, absolutely. How long did it take for you to get to that point to where you started to realize what yourself is outside of the Air
I
Force?
mean, even when I got out, man, I would say it took a good year and a half, to finally get like where no alcohol, where I'm dealing with all this stuff and I'm facing it. Finally, I'm not running from, I'm facing it, right, and that demon.
Yeah. And I've heard others say that's their get right time where it's a big transition. And I do a lot of work with have you ever heard of BHA, Country Hunters and
I
Anglers?
know it's right.
So they are basically they do a lot of fights for our public lands, and they believe that us as Americans have right to public lands, and they do a lot of fighting for that. But they also have another division that is the Armed Forces Initiative, and I have a few friends that operate throughout the AFI, and I've had numerous conversations with them. They've been on previous episodes of the show, and they just talk about that get right time and how important it can be for somebody that is getting out of the military to actually go out and be around others that have gone through similar things, whether they're in the same branch or a different branch or have been in combat or not been in combat. But just having somebody that has an understanding of things you've been through and surrounding yourself with people that are getting past it at the same time or have already gotten past it. And their way is more towards, the outdoors and not only helping the veterans, which is their primary thing, but also helping lands and keeping these places open to the public and educating others. And so they have like these special skills training camps and stuff like that where they'll teach them certain things with hunting or fishing or camping or hiking or whatever the case may be. But they have a true understanding that the outdoors is really therapeutic for a lot of people. So the Armed Forces Initiative does a lot of work in that. And when I talk to them, numerous times about the situation is that get right time seems to be the hardest time. And, there's stories of people that have found AFI after the fact. And they're like, man, like, I wish I knew about this, when I was going through that get right period and getting out, trying to transition back into living a civilian life. So, yeah, from what I've heard, it's a very tough time for people, but it also helps the veterans that like have more of an understanding of PTSD and how to manage PTSD. And so like, what are some of the things that you wish more people understood about PTSD and veteran mental health after you've gone through it yourself?
I would say to be able to sort of recognize it, and especially veterans on veterans, like we know each other, like more than anybody, right? And I think there's a difference between saying, "Hey, how's it going, man?" versus like, "Hey, how you doing, really, man?" or "How are you feeling?"
Yeah.
And it's civilians, and your family and like people you were close to growing up that they can ask those words as well, and just let them know you're there for them, and that that at the end, everything's going to be okay, man.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And that's one thing that I've heard of, those BHAA5 people talking about is that there's the difference between a relationship with somebody that has been through things that you've been through and somebody else is different. But even somebody that hasn't been through it can still reach out and still be that person and, say, hey man, I haven't heard from you for a while. Let's go grab a beer. Let's go grab a bite to eat or just something along those lines where being less of a passerby, hey man, how are you doing, to like, hey, like, how are you actually doing? Kind of making sure that you actually have that relationship with that person, actually feel okay to talk about things when they really are going through it. But I mean, with us being dudes, it's hard.
Yeah,
I mean, I get
yeah.
that. We don't like talking about things, so it's easier to open up to somebody that's been through similar things as well. So I
Oh
get
yeah,
that
and
side of it.
and often, to be honest, those conversations may happen on a front porch in Appalachia or whatever. There's people I knew growing up there that they would definitely recognize. They did recognize, and so you're all right. They asked the questions, and that too helped, which led into getting, especially when you're on terminal leave, right, to get help.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess we can transition back a little bit more to the book and talk more about what it means to you. How did you come up with the title
Yeah,
Moonchild?
yeah. So there's a couple reasons there. So the moon, like I was born on the full moon in April 7th of '82, and I've always just been sort of infatuated with it for some reason. And flying on the AC-130 gunship, with a 100% illume, like a full moon, right? Like with NVGs, it made flying almost effortless, man. Like you could see all the mountaintops, all the ridges. You could even see reflections of the moon on the water, like ground to ground tracer fire, ground to air tracer fire. It was in a way like a lighthouse for me. In flying, there's a term we use, it's called a get well point. basically if you're lost in the orbit, AC-130 gunship does left-hand orbits like all night, and so if you see what side of the orbit I'm on, okay, the moon's on that side, the west side, or whatever the case is, okay, it gets you back to to ground zero, gets you leveled out again, right? Get you back in the fight. And also I've realized in some of these scenarios with flying, like it could be emergency procedures, it could be malfunctions, it could be the weather, it could be the enemy and communications, you name it. What can go wrong will go wrong in those moments, and that's when you don't get to fall, you get to rise. And to me, the moon always burned the brightest on those darkest nights. And lastly, one of my favorite poems is "Stay Wild Moonchild" by Rita Clint.
So you had numerous reasons why you chose that title.
Oh, yeah, it's mainly all moon, but a lot of symbology there.
That's awesome. So when people read this book, what's something that they can expect, from cover to cover as they read through it?
So some of the feedback I've got from even one of the pilots I flew with, she said that his only book that made her laugh and cry within the same couple hours. It is a short read, but it's based on the roots and wings, like roots being back home in Appalachia, taking those morals, the things that grounded me, right, and then the wings aspect of it basically let me see the world, and basically it's good to know where you come from, but it's really more important to know where you're going, because you can, one thing you control always is your attitude through everything and your perseverance.
Absolutely. That's awesome, man. How many pages is it?
It's 156 pages. It's like I said, it's a really quick read, but I call it a Sunday read.
Yeah. And where can people find it at?
So you can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and then Trademarker Media, my publisher, Robbie Grayson, there in Franklin, Tennessee, he has a page for it on Trademarker.
Okay, awesome. And then, for those of y'all that are watching, I'll put the links in the description, so you don't have to keep rewinding to try to find them. I'll go ahead and put the links down there, and y'all can check it out. So, yeah, man, I'm excited to check it out, and I'll probably read it myself. I'm not much of a reader, but 156 pages, I think I can manage pretty well.
Thanks, but yeah, it was crazy, because when I wrote the book, like I thought I had at least what I thought was enough for a book, right? And so I reached out to like LinkedIn, right? Like, hey, editor for military stories or something like that. And Holly McKay was a war journalist, and she responded right away. And then next thing you know, I had a phone call appointment. And so yeah, I'll do it. And then there was a Word document. She did a really good job of helping me say the loud part out loud, I like to say, and and give my words teeth, and then she recommended the publisher, and he did an awesome job, Robbie Grayson, with the hardware of the book and just overall, oversight of it.
Awesome. So did it come to fruition pretty quick after you started writing and kind of getting the ball rolling, or how long did it take you from starting it to actually publishing it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I would say from pen to paper to book in hand, about right at 7 months, which I guess is relatively fast. But,
really?
But and again, a lot of that was I had at least a lot of the combat stuff already on paper.
Right. Because you'd already done that through therapy, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense. So what else did you have to add to the story after getting, that section of it done?
Definitely the roots part. I had to really go back, and I'm thinking back like, man, 18, what is that, 27 years ago, give or take. So I had to really go back, and think about growing up, and, little things that I didn't think about my summers growing up and fishing in that Tuckasegee River, right? Like all that stuff I'd forgotten, it makes you miss it again,
Yeah. Do you do much fishing now?
Every now and then we'll go probably 3 or 4 times a summer, to different places out here in New Mexico and then Texas as well. Yeah.
That's awesome. So we talked a little bit before we got into the episode about your dad and his record brown trout. So were you there when he caught it?
I was not. So I was a sophomore in high school, and basically I remember I got home and Dad, like, there was these people pulling up in the driveway, and I think it was either 23.6 or something like that, maybe 26.4, different numbers in my head, but this huge brown trout that looks like a salmon, right? Like, it's how big it looked, and there was, I remember I get home and there's like this kid some guy brought his baby girl, she laid beside it, it's as long as like 36 inches or something like that. And I just remember, like, man, did you catch that in like one of these rivers? Like, how did that thing had to be like top of the food chain? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It was an insane story. He caught it on like 10-pound test, which was like really, it's just a miracle he got it in, and that, especially in the current of the Nantahala River.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's boggles my mind how people catch some of these fish on the poundage that they have. I mean, there was a guy recently, I don't remember where it was out of, but he caught like a 40-something inch fish on 2-pound test, and I'm like, dude, you got to fight that fish for like 4 hours, and I mean, it can't even go into the current the right way. Like, you have to fight it a certain way if you're using line that small. And I mean, I've I've caught some pretty big fish, and I've always had a pretty stout line. And I'm a fly fisherman, and so typically, if I'm going to be going for a big fish, like if I go down to Louisiana or Texas coast and I plan on going for redfish, like I'm going to have a setup that's going to be pretty heavy line.
But
But there's some people that, catch massive carp and things like that when they're, they'll be fishing for bluegill and they'll
yeah.
hook into a carp and fight it for 45 minutes and land it on 2-pound test. I'm like, how in the hell do people do that?
Yeah, man.
Insane.
I'll email you a picture of it, like when he got it, and yeah, and I was telling people, my dad, man, even bass fishing, right, man, like he didn't fish like normal people. He fishes like a hunter, man. He hunts a fish. I tell people
Yeah.
he could be on the front of the boat, I'll be in the back, he'll be catching them, switch with me, and he'll still be catching them, and I won't. And it's just some people got that sixth sense, man. Fish whisper, and I put a lot of that stuff in the book there that's Appalachia specific, and you ever heard of like what do we call it? You use the two copper wires bent at 9 degrees to find water. They
Find
cross
water.
Yeah, like there was a whole society back home that people made money like doing that, and like my grandfather taught me that growing up, and I just thought that's how we found water, and until I went to steer school and all that. But yeah, it was an awesome place to grow up in. I'll say that.
That's awesome. I'm definitely gonna have to make a trip up there sometime and try to experience some of that fishing. I mean, we got good fishing water here in Arkansas. The White River is a world renowned fishery, and there's massive brown. And I've caught some massive brown trout and some massive Bonneville cutthroat trout out of there and things of that nature. But there's just something about going up to that region. And I mean, I don't even want to go catch big fish. Like I just want to go catch small, pretty native fish. And I'm weird like that. Like I just love native fish or species that are endemic to certain areas. We have a few endemic species here in Arkansas that you can't find anywhere else. Texas has a couple of them as well. And so there's things along that line that I geek out on. But going up there to the mountains and just blue line the little streams catching native fish, like it's going to happen sometime soon. I'm hoping this next summer I can make it happen.
Oh yeah, there's nothing more beautiful fish wise than a brook trout, like you were talking about, man. It's just beautiful colors,
It is for sure. But also catching a big 30 inch plus brown trout definitely would be awesome too.
Yeah, that people ask me about that every time I go home. Does he still hold the record? And I was like, I think so. I don't know, but yeah, it was huge, man.
Man, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate you hopping on, man, and sharing your story, and I'll definitely be picking up that book soon, and I'll read more into it. Thank you so much for hopping on with us. And for those of y'all watching to the end, we'll catch y'all next time. Don't forget to share this with a friend. Tell somebody to watch it.
This has been Wildlife Outdoors. Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook at Wildlife Outdoors and on Instagram at wild.life.outdoors. Let's go live life on the wild side.